Good afternoon, students. We are now in the very last week of class, week 12. The last day of school, or the last day of this class, is going to be on Friday, June 30th. And you need to hand in all of your assignments by midnight Pacific time. Any assignment handed in after midnight will get a 0. The zeros all become permanent. I will be submitting final grades exactly at midnight on Friday, because Saturday morning all of the final grades for all your classes are, for the teachers anyway, are due. But for students, it's midnight, June 30th, everything is due. And so that's why you need to be on time and for your final assignments. And I don't even have the authority to give you an extension beyond June 30th. If you need an extension beyond June 30th, then you need to talk to your student advisor to get permission to extend the class. So after June 30th, that's it for me. And so I will grade your final grades. So far, so good, and I'm really proud of all of the work you've all done this semester. So without further ado, this week's lecture is going to be about different kinds of body paragraphs, introduction paragraphs, conclusion paragraphs, and I will introduce the very last kind of sentence, which is the compound complex sentence. So without further ado, I will share my screen, and here is the week 12 lecture. And so here the week 12 lecture is going to be about here the APA mistakes so far in week 12 forum, which is what you're doing right now. It's just a reflective forum where you just talk about what you think and how much you've gotten out of or not gotten out of this class. Make sure you remember to to fill out your end of class surveys. So Donald and Chantel, did you fill out your end of class surveys?
No, I haven't done it yet.
Okay, well, it's anonymous. Okay,
Not yet.
It's anonymous, so you can write. That's why you can then write your true emotions, show your true selves, and that way the school will know how they can improve the class design, or I can learn about how I can improve my teaching. So don't forget to fill out your end of class surveys. It's in your email. Fortis would send it to you through your email. So you got to look through your week 7 and week 8 email. So they would have started sending it out sometime in week 7. So you've got to look that up. So don't forget to do that. Each faculty is trying to get 80% of their students to do the end of class survey. So if you like what I did, you can write about that. And if you didn't, then you just write how the class can be improved. All right, so APA mistakes. The most common APA mistakes is that somebody would write an entire essay and have no in-text citation. This is an in-text citation in which you put, as soon as I turned 18, I was officially an adult and got a job at a call center making a living, and my parents cut me off financially. And then she put that. Then you can put in, this is not a good example, but basically when you have an in-text citation, that's what's inside the body of your paragraph. This is a good example of an in-text citation. Whenever you have any kind of numbers, so here majority of school-age children go straight to work from school, then work every other weekend and make $200 every other week if they choose to work. So when you use numbers of any type, you need to cite the source. So even for your final draft, you need to have at least one in-text citation. And so a lot of students lost points because they're missing that one in-text citation inside their essay. And instead, all they have is just a reference citation. So you still need to have an in-text citation in your final draft. And another good in-text citation is you need to cite medical facts. So there are a lot of people all over the country that struggle with mental health. Most people having depression also have some type of anxiety disorder. So because this is a medical fact, you have to cite the source. Even if you're paraphrasing the source, you still have to cite the source. Any kind of medical fact, numerical fact, scientific fact, you have to cite the source. Therapy is more effective, whereas mediation can be, or medication I think is what she meant, can be addictive. So how do you know that medications are addictive? So you need to list this medical fact. And then here you can, and if you Google these exact words into the Google and you say Diana Hacker sample APA paper, then you can download your own sample APA paper. And so here are some examples of people who have not given a correct reference citation. All they did was they gave me a web address. So if you look at the week 10, 11, and 12 forums, you will notice that students make these kind of mistakes all the time, mainly because it's faster. Most people think, oh, well, I'm just going to give them the web address and then everybody can access my source. And for a lot of students, they think that's much faster to do, and they think it takes too much time to put in the author name, the date, the article name, the publication name. But the reason why we put in all of these other details is to give credit to the researcher who did the research. So that way that you know that you're not stealing their information. If you just put in a web address, that's like just stealing their information. You need to put in the whole thing in order to avoid plagiarism. Also, when you use any kind of numbers, you have to put in the quotation marks to avoid a high plagiarism score on your Turnitin report. So here's another example of how you would do an APA. This is a scientific fact. So the poor and those at the lower end of the social economic bracket suffer most from the inability to afford health insurance. As the population ages and more people rely on Social Security, it has become more difficult for this group to afford medication and some healthcare services. And this is a medical fact, and so you would have Rashford 2007, since this is a paraphrase. When you have a paraphrase, you don't need to have quotation marks. Usually you use quotation marks if you are doing a direct quote. But if you're doing a paraphrase, you don't need to have quotation marks. Here's another example of a medical fact. The most striking advantage of a universal healthcare system in the U.S. is the potential to address the epidemic level of non-communicable chronic diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, all of which strain the national economy. And then here you have to have, and then you put your period after the in-text citation. And so, and here you have some, notice you have Radford over here as your reference, Radford and Zeef as your reference citation, and you have Zeef and I believe Radford as your in-text citations. So that means that your in-text citations, Radford and Zeef, needs to match your reference citation, Radford and Zeef. So if your reference citation and your in-text citation match, then that means you're doing it correctly. And so here is another example of someone who didn't put in this is an in-text citation, Keller and Van Mackinson, and then Keller and Van Mackinson should also be in your in-text citation. So for APA, we cite the following: statistics, percentages, prices, hours, numerical data, historical data, scientific and medical data, population data, and unknown knowledge such as cultural data not familiar to American culture. When we do a direct quote, we cite word per word what the author says. We use quotation marks and we use author, date, and page number. And then when we do a paraphrase quote, we summarize a direct quote in our own words and we write author and date. And then the reference citation, you don't just put the web address, you put the whole thing. Last name, first name, date, article name, publication, date you retrieve the website, and then you write the web address. So the web address is the last thing you put in at the end of your reference citation before everything else. And so this gives credit to the researcher. And in order to find credible sources, you have to do kapow. C stands for currency, A stands for author, P stands for purpose, O stands for objective, and W stands for writing style. And so you got to make sure that the purpose, it's not an advertisement. Objective, that it's neutral. Writing style is professional. The author is an expert. Currency, within the last 10 years. And then you make sure that you have the website endings of .edu, .org, or .gov. And if you want to know the latest on APA, you can go to www.apa.org to buy your own APA manual. And you can go to the Purdue OWL Library, which is from the Purdue University, which also is a good source for APA. If you're going to do an annotated bibliography, you would write the reference citation and then you summarize the essay. So don't freak out. This is not something you have to do for your final draft. But whenever you write a really long reference, a long research paper for your other classes, and your teacher says, I need you to make a annotated bibliography, and you scratching your head going, what's that? So an annotated bibliography is the same thing as a reference citation, except you just add a summary. So here you have your reference citation, and then you write a summary. Rashford talks about why it is important for the United States to have a universal healthcare system that is free and available to all U.S. citizens so that everyone has access to basic medical care. This study is a literature review of 5 other research studies on this topic. And so just write a 3-line or 4-line summary, and this is a annotated bibliography. Notice how it's in alphabetical order. R, Rashford, comes before Z, Zeef. So that is also a common, so just like your reference citation, your references, it has to be in alphabetical order. And so Zeef talks about the pros and cons of universal health care. He discusses both the advantages and disadvantages of universal health care. Although Zeef discusses both sides of the issue, Zeef feels that the U.S. needs a universal healthcare system to encourage American people to stay healthier for the long-term health of the U.S. economy. So this is a summary or an abstract of this article. Okay, well, actually, your summary of the article. So you summarize in your own words what the article was about. So that is and we use an annotated bibliography if you have a long research paper of, say, more than 5 to 10 sources, and then this helps the researcher and it helps you keep track of all your different sources. So that is and also it shows your teacher that you read the article, because these summaries, you don't just cut and paste that from the abstract from Google Scholar. This is in your own words. You've read the article, then you write in your own words a 3-line summary, and that is an annotated bibliography. And your teacher will always be able to tell if you cut and paste from the abstract. Okay, so don't try to. So it's okay to be a little bit conversational. That indicates to the teacher that you wrote this summary. So that is an annotated bibliography. In this class, you don't have to use an annotated bibliography. You just need to have reference citations. But a lot of my other students have told me that their professors in other classes have asked them to do an annotated bibliography. Then the students ask me, Yvonne or Professor H, can you go over what's an annotated bibliography? So that's what I did. So all you have to do is and you put the annotated bibliography at the end of the paper, after the last page of the paper, just like you would do your reference citations. So that's an annotated bibliography, it's just like your reference citations. Then for your week 12 forum, then you could reflect upon what you've learned in this class. How can I apply what I learned in this class to my life, to my workplace? How can the teaching in this class be improved? How can the lectures be improved? Did I enjoy this class? What tips would I give future students? How can the class design be improved? Also, don't forget that for the last week of class, the due date is Friday, not Sunday. All assignments will be due Friday at midnight. So if you hand in assignments after midnight Pacific, if you hand it that's 3 a.m. Eastern, if you hand it in after that time, you will get a 0. And like I said earlier, I will be submitting my final grades right after midnight on Friday. So now I'll begin this week's compound complex lesson. So when we study compound complex, we have 3 kinds of sentences. So first I'm going to go over very quickly your week 7. This you should know like this. So the first kind of sentence is a simple sentence. You have subject, verb, object. A sentence is a complete thought, also known as an independent clause. So Jack gets good grades. Jack is the subject, gets is the verb, good is the adjective, grades is the object. So Jack is tall. Jack is the subject. Is the verb. Tall is the adjective. Up the hill sits an old house. Then you have a prepositional phrase. That's up the hill is a prepositional phrase because a prepositional phrase shows time and place, plus a verb plus a subject. And up the hill sits an old house is the same meaning as the old house sits up the hill. So these are all simple sentences, subject, verb, object. And then compound sentences, that's two simple sentences joined by fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So a compound sentence has fanboys in it. Fanboys are coordinating conjunctions that join two sentences together. A coordinating conjunction joins two simple sentences together to form a compound sentence. And the word compound means two. So basically it just means two sentences, compound. Jack gets good grades, comma, for he studies hard. Jack is tall, but Mary is short. Steve gambles all the time, comma, yet he loses rarely at the casinos. So far we've done simple sentences and compound sentences. You have an independent clause that has equal significance as the second independent clause. The third kind of sentence is a complex sentence. So a complex sentence has a subordinating conjunction, dependent and independent clause. So the subordinating conjunction after, although, as long as though, because, before, even though, and if, and all of these words in blue are all subordinating conjunctions that start a dependent clause. And you can remember subordinating conjunctions by remembering AAWW And so if the subordinating clause is the main sentence, in other words, if the subordinate clause is at the beginning of the sentence, we use a comma. So after John eats dinner, comma, he goes to bed. Although Jack is fat, comma, he eats very little. As soon as the alarm clock rings, comma, Steve jumps out of bed. If the subordinate conjunction is at the end of the sentence, we do not use a comma. John goes to bed after he eats dinner. He eats very little, although he is fat. And then here, when you have WWWT, you have a different set of rules. So if the dependent clause with who, which, and what, where, when, that, which is at the beginning of the sentence, you have two commas. And if WWWT is at the end of the sentence, you have one comma. So far, that is all that we studied up to week 7. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. So compound, complex. This is where yes, Chantal.
No, I was going to say no. I was trying to hit
Oh, okay. So this is what's new is compound, complex. As the name suggests, a compound, complex sentence brings both of these sentence forms together. That is, it contains at least two independent clauses like a compound sentence and at least one dependent clause like a complex sentence. So let's take this apart. First, you have Mary is rich. So that is a simple sentence. That's an independent clause. Then you have Mary is rich, but John is poor. That's a compound sentence. Now, if I were to add in, while Mary is rich, John is poor, that's a complex sentence. So if I wanted here, Mary is rich, but John is poor. Mary, who is French, is rich, but John is poor. Now that's a compound complex sentence. That's all I had to do was add a dependent clause to my compound sentence, and voila, I've got a compound complex sentence. How is that so? So Mary, who is French, is a dependent clause, and then John is poor is an independent clause, and you put that together, and that's a complex sentence. Then if I say Mary is rich, but John is poor, then that is a compound sentence. So when you put all of this together, Mary, who is French, but John, usually you have a parallel, is American, is poor. That is a compound complex sentence. And it's got parallelism because I've got who is and who is in both sentences. And so this is about as complex as an American sentence will get. In other languages, if you speak Spanish, for instance, you can have sentences a lot more complex than this. And you can have sentences with a lot of relative clauses, and it still makes sense. But in English, this is about as long as it gets. If you try to make it any longer, then your sentence becomes awkward. This is the reason why your English teacher will write awkward into your paper, because the English teacher is going to assume that you already know your sentence structure, and as soon as someone writes awkward, that means you got to go fix your sentence structure based on simple, compound, complex, and compound, complex sentences, because you're supposed to already know your grammar since you're out of grammar school. If you're only in 3rd grade, you're forgiven for not knowing your grammar, and then the teacher will write a long explanation of what awkward means. So if I take away Mary, who is French, okay, if I take that away, and I take away this as well, let's see if I can get rid of that comma, and then if I get rid of John, who is American, then I end up with a compound sentence. So all I did was add in a dependent clause. So when you add in dependent clauses to your compound sentence, that's how you have a compound complex sentence. So let's do that again. Lupe, who is a great student, went to school a long time ago, and she is reviewing her grammar. So Lupe went to school a long time ago, and she is reviewing her grammar. That's a compound sentence. Then you add in the dependent clause, who is a great student, and then you have a compound complex sentence. Okay? Here are some more examples of compound complex sentences. Erin loves her brother, and he loves her too because she pays his bills. So here you have Erin loves her brother is one sentence, and he loves her too. This whole thing is a compound sentence. Then I add in a dependent clause, because she pays his bills. As soon as you add in a dependent clause to the compound sentence, then you have a compound complex sentence. The dog ran off, but I didn't care. That's a compound sentence. Then I added in the dependent clause, when I chased him, and then it became a compound complex sentence. So all you have to do is add a dependent clause to your compound sentence, and then you have a compound complex sentence. Though my mother says it doesn't matter, I am tall and she is short. So I am tall and she is short, that's a compound sentence. And then I add in the dependent clause, though my mother says it doesn't matter. And so always when you have a subordinating conjunction like though, then that makes this whole thing a dependent clause. So once again, I added a dependent clause to my compound sentence, and then it became a compound complex sentence. So compound complex sentences are the most complicated sentences you're going to run into in English. A compound complex sentence has at least 2 independent clauses and at least 1 dependent clause. In simple terms, an independent clause can be a sentence on its own, while a dependent clause cannot. And so here you have more examples. So a simple sentence would be, the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes. Cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So here you have 2 simple sentences. A lot of people, when they write their essays, is one simple sentence after another simple sentence after another simple sentence, and you end up with an essay that's way too choppy. And so you can combine your 2 simple sentences together as a compound or a complex sentence. It depends on, so if you add a subordinating conjunction like although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So here I combine these two sentences together with although. So this becomes a complex sentence. If I combine these 2 sentences with fanboys, then this becomes a compound sentence. And if I add in a dependent clause to my compound, if I add a dependent clause to this compound sentence, it becomes a compound complex sentence. So here, if I added in, although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. Revised as a complex sentence. The severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, and the cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So for the first 3 of these, all I did was I combined these 2 simple sentences either by adding a subordinating conjunction or by adding fanboys. Now, if I put all the sentences together, I can add an extra sentence. And so although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. And so here you have your dependent clause and an independent clause, and next year should see fewer, less severe storms. And so here you have cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause, and next year would see fewer, less severe storms. That's the compound sentence. And then you add your dependent clause to the compound sentence, and then you have a compound complex sentence. Now, isn't all of this very easy and understandable? Yes or no? Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
Yes. Should all be reviewed from elementary school. Did you learn all of this in first, second, third, fifth, sixth, seventh grade?
I don't remember.
Are you going to teach this to your kids?
Hopefully you won't teach it to me again.
You'll let them teach it to you again. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what are the 4 kinds of sentences in English? Anybody?
Oh, you have it right here. You have it right here?
Yeah.
Simple, compound, complex.
Compound complex. Yeah, and give me an example of a compound complex sentence. And all you have to do is give a compound sentence and add a dependent clause to it, and you've got a compound complex sentence.
You were saying how you add although, I think.
Okay, you could do it the hard way. Most people just come up with the compound sentence first. John is poor, but Mary is rich. John, who is French, is poor, but Mary is rich. So first come up with your compound sentence, then add a dependent clause to it. That's the easy way. But if you want to do it the hard way, that's good too. So what is your compound sentence?
Let's see. I went to work today, although I wanted to stay home in bed. I don't know, something like that.
Okay, that is a complex sentence, but okay. So there you have an independent clause and a dependent clause. That's a complex sentence. How would you make a compound complex sentence? You need to add another sentence. And I love to work every day.
Yeah, right.
So that would be a compound.
Not every day, maybe 5 days a week.
5 days a week. You know, in some countries they're experimenting with a 4-day work week. And then they still pay you for the extra day off or something like that. I'm like, cool.
That sounds lovely.
No wonder that the people in that country are so happy. They listed the happiest countries in the world, and that was it was
it gives you time to spend more with your family.
Yes, yeah, Finland. I think it's Finland. I have to look that up. Anyway, so how to write comparison, contrast, transition words in different sentence structures. So this is a review of week 8, I believe. So here you don't have to write the same thing as a child, as a child, as a child. The reason why I brought this up is because you're all doing your week 12 final draft. So here is a quick reminder of different ways of saying but. So in contrast to adulthood, a child plays all day. Unlike adulthood, a child plays all day. Adulthood is filled with responsibilities while children play all day. Although children play all day, adults work all day. Children play all day, however, adults work all day. In this way, you don't use as a child I played all day all the time. As a child I played all day. As a child I had no job. As a child I had fun with my friends. And as a child, in other words, 3 as a child is a bit much. So here you can write different ways of saying as a child and different ways of saying but for your final draft. Even if you don't remember my entire week 8 lesson, the least you can remember is the stuff in this box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For a young mind like you guys, you should be able to remember this much. For old people, you can remember this much. That's the difference. But you guys are young and in your prime, and therefore you should be able to remember the most 5 of them at a time. So,
What do you consider young and old?
well, I consider myself kind of old, and I consider you guys young. There you go. That way,
That was cute. That was cute, but you don't know how old we are.
Oh, I already think that you guys are young because you guys are not being, well, that's another story, but you're not in AARP. So if you don't know what AARP is, you're young. Okay, that was given to me at a party. I remember I went to a party. We all were playing games, and some lady goes, "Oh my God, I just got AARP in my mail. Oh my God, I'm old." And I remember sitting there going, "What's AARP?" I said that, and then everyone goes, "Oh my God, she's young. She doesn't know what AARP." I became the butt of the. That's where I got that. What you call it. So I decided. Then when I got my first AARP, I'm like, "Oh, I'm old too." Yeah. And if you don't know what AARP is, you're the young one. So I'll wait. You're gonna wait until they know. They I don't know how they figure it out, but they just know when you turn 50. So that's when you start getting AARP notices in the mail automatically. Just like when I was 14, I got Barbizon model. Do you want to become a Barbizon model? You know, they just know when you're 14 years old, then that's Barbizon, and then 50 becomes AARP. Although I think I prefer the Barbizon. They just know. Anyway, so now we're going to go over different kinds of introduction paragraphs. The first introduction paragraph, the funnel introduction paragraph. Here you place the thesis statement as the last sentence of the first paragraph. So that's like an upside down triangle. So that way you give context to your thesis statement. So that's what I've been teaching you all along in all of your essays in this class so far. So here's an example of a funnel introduction paragraph where you start out very general and then you end up very specific because that's your thesis statement. America is a throwaway society. From both industrial and municipal sources, the United States generates about 10 billion metric tons of solid waste per year. Every 5 years, the average American discards an amount of waste equal in weight to the Statue of Liberty. Smalley, 2021, 127. And so here you have many different ways in which you can state your in-text citation. In other words, any kind of number, you got to put in an in-text citation. So this I use pie structure, in which I wrote P was the main point from the thesis statement. Then I wrote I is my in-text citation. E is then the rest of this paragraph is just 5 sentences to explain that in-text citation. Evidently, Americans throw away a lot of garbage. A lot of the garbage could be recycled, but most garbage ends up in landfills. Americans leave a large carbon footprint because Americans generate so much waste. Something needs to be done to save the environment. More recycling efforts need to be put in place so that less garbage ends up in landfills. In fact, the repercussions of excess waste stretches to every city from New York to Los Angeles. Therefore, it is a duty of every American to find a way to recycle. Thus, the only way to reuse garbage is through recycling. And now I've got my thesis statement is recycling saves the environment. So recycling garbage, topic, saves the environment, opinion, and then you've got your tour, topic, opinion, reasons. That's how you write your thesis statement as the last sentence of the first paragraph. So recycling garbage saves the environment because plastic water bottles can be reused. Less garbage will end up in landfills, and future generations will be able to enjoy an earth that is less polluted with garbage. And so that's where you put your thesis statement. And so this is known as the funnel introduction paragraph. And then so far so good? Good. Another kind of introduction paragraph is known as the turnabout paragraph. This type of paragraph opens with a few sentences summarizing a point of view that is actually the opposite of the writer's own thesis. By the end of the introduction, the writer makes a complete turnabout and presents his or her thesis, the opposite of what he or she started out with. This technique is useful in the writer's purpose if the essay is arguing a controversial point of view to clear up a commonly misheld misconception. Translation. So here you would have, my thesis statement is smoking is dangerous because smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. So that's my thesis at the very end, saying that smoking is dangerous. So in a turnabout introduction paragraph, you write about what the other side thinks. So the other side thinks that many people think smoking is glamorous. After all, young people see celebrities smoking all the time in movies. All old-time movies those old black and white movies feature Betty Davis smoking. Cary Grant lights up as he tries to win the heart of the girl. Rock stars light up, and commercials in magazines show cowboys smoking Marlboro cigarettes. As a result, young people associate smoking with maturity, elegance, good health, and sophistication. The Reynolds cigarette company even offers strawberry-flavored cigarettes, this would be vaping, to entice young people to smoke. Cigarette vendors claim that electronic cigarettes are harmless as it emits water vapor instead of smoke, like a regular cigarette. So young people come away with the idea that if they smoke an electronic cigarette, they will not suffer the harmful effects of a regular cigarette. So all of this talks about what the other side thinks. So if I think that smoking is dangerous, the other side thinks smoking is harmless. So that you start with the first part of the entire paragraph talking about why the other side thinks smoking is harmless. Then I do a complete turnabout. However, smoking electronic cigarettes are just as harmful as smoking cigarettes. In reality, smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. This is a turnabout because you're turning about and you're doing a 360-degree turnabout and talking about your point of view, which is totally the opposite of the other side's point of view. And this is more of a dramatic, this gives your thesis statement a kind of dramatic entrance, even though that's not the name. In other words, a good turnabout. So it's very, very dramatic. Do you like this kind of introduction paragraph?
Yes.
Very showy, if you will. And so this is also a good way in which you can write about both sides of an issue, and you make your essay fair and balanced and objective, and you avoid fallacies and bias. Now the last kind of, I think that's it. Yeah, the last kind of introduction paragraph is known as a dramatic entrance, in which you tell a story, then you write your thesis. So the dramatic entrance introduction describes the scene or tells an anecdote of the topic before you place the thesis at the end of the paragraph. So here I use the same thesis statement. Smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and so on and so on. So I'm going to use the same thesis statement, but I'm going to use a different introduction. So instead of talking about what the other side thinks, I'm just simply going to talk about, I'm going to use as an example a case study. Kind of like if you were a nurse and you're talking a case study about one of your patients. Betty sits in her wheelchair with a tube sticking out of her throat. She now uses that throat for breathing since her lung and nose cancer has eroded and destroyed her nasal passages. After 60 years of smoking, Betty has terminal nose and throat cancer. However, she does not want anybody else to suffer this sad fate, especially her grandchildren. She waits patiently as the cameraman prepares the camera for this most important Just Say No smoking ad. The cameraman motions to her to speak. Betty starts to speak. My name is Betty Smith. I began smoking at the age of 14. Now I am dying a horrible slow death due to lung and throat cancer. I no longer have a nose to breathe out of, and I now have to breathe out of a tube. I do not have much more time to live. Please, do not start smoking if you want to avoid my fate. Just say no when somebody offers you a cigarette because your life may depend on it. So as the commercial closes, Betty breathes a sigh of relief that maybe she has saved a life. Okay, so that is your dramatic entrance. Then you have your thesis statement. Indeed, it is true that smoking is harmful to one's health because smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So you have 3 ways to do your introduction paragraph. You can use a lot of facts, such as pie structure, which is you already know how to do that. Or you can write about what the other side says, or you can write a story. And in each case, you have to write your thesis statement always the last sentence of the first paragraph. And you can use the same thesis statement, and this is why you can have many different ways of writing introduction paragraphs, many different ways of writing body paragraphs. And all I had time to do was to teach you pie structure in this class so far. So for your final draft, you can use a dramatic turnabout introduction paragraph, or you can write yourself a dramatic introduction paragraph. So if you haven't turned in your final draft yet, feel free to try to write one of these other kinds of paragraphs to practice writing other styles. Different kinds of body paragraphs. There are 4 major body paragraph types, and we've covered just about all of them in this class: narrative, descriptive, expository, and persuasive. The body paragraph can be used to describe any number of things. It's important to note that each type of paragraph has its own purpose. Narrative paragraphs tell about a scene or event. Descriptive paragraphs give vivid descriptions of one subject. Expository paragraphs provide information, and persuasive paragraphs try to convince the reader of the point of view. These types of body paragraphs are powerful tools for writers. So a body paragraph, that's your middle paragraph. So far, most of you have just been writing expository paragraphs, and I think persuasive. Not too many narrative and descriptive. So an expository paragraph gives information about a subject. That's the pie structure paragraph. You are writing an expository paragraph when you are writing any paragraph to back up, describe, illustrate the main thesis. You are either providing information to back up the thesis statement, or you are providing information to back up the topic sentence, which relates back to the thesis statement. So basically, in expository, you're just giving the facts. Narrative body paragraph means that you are using your own experiences, your own personal experiences from your life to back up the thesis. Persuasive body paragraph means that you want to convince the reader of your point of view. And so that we did in the week 9 and 10 forums. A descriptive paragraph is when you want to describe an event and make the reader experiencing the event by using adjectives and appealing to all 5 human senses. And we did that in, I think it was week 3 of this class. So we've done all 4 kinds of body paragraphs, although for an academic research paper, the expository body paragraph, which is the pie structure paragraph, is the most common paragraph used in academic research papers. Narrative body paragraphs occur mainly in narrative essays, and persuasive body paragraphs usually in persuasive and argumentative essays, but in expository body paragraphs occur everywhere. And so that's it for body paragraphs. Everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay, we're nearing the end. Okay, so different kinds of conclusion paragraphs. So far, I've been teaching you a summary in which you repeat the thesis statement as the first sentence of the last paragraph, and then you write a summary of your essay in 5 sentences. So here is an example of a summary in conclusion paragraph. It is the most simplest and most common form of conclusion paragraph for academic research papers. In this format, you restate the thesis and summarize the main points of the essay, and you end with a strong, final-sounding statement. So smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. People who smoke have a higher chance of getting these cancers. Smoking has harmful, cancer-causing ingredients like nicotine, which destroys the lungs, stomach, and the throat. People who smoke all their lives end up with a tube in their throat and a shorter lifespan. Do not be fooled by the celebrities and the glamorous movies. Smoking is not good for one's health. Avoid smoking at all costs. Quit smoking as soon as possible. And so this has one mistake. One should write, smoking is not good for one's health. So try to avoid using you and your so that you have a more professional tone. A recommendation conclusion, which is known as a call to action conclusion. This means that you want the reader to take an action. So you don't simply just summarize it. You want to convince the reader, go buy my product. Go protest against this social injustice. So that means you're actually going to make the reader care so much about your topic. The reader's going to go out and do something about it. This kind of summary paragraph is used all the time in business correspondence, because the reason why business people have those letters is so that the reader can go out and buy the product. So a call to action conclusion paragraph is always at the end of your business letter, always at the end of your business email in which you get the reader to do something. So here, that's why it's a call to action. And the most famous call to action conclusion is actually, let me think, Martin Luther King. So a recommendation call to action suggests possible changes that can be implemented to improve the situation you have described. What actions can you propose that your readers take? Smoking causes lung. You still have to repeat the thesis statement as the first sentence. So here you repeat that, just like in the introduction, all your thesis statements still have to be the last sentence of the first paragraph. So in all the conclusions, your thesis statement is still the first sentence of the last paragraph. So smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. And then here you have, if people quit smoking, they can have a longer lifespan. So I'm giving someone a recommendation of what to do for the future. That's a recommendation conclusion. I recommend people consult their doctors to find out ways to quit smoking. People can research quit smoking research groups, and people can join to quit smoking. People can chew nicotine gum to lessen the urge to smoke and then quit smoking altogether. People can also wear a nicotine patch, which releases nicotine into your blood slowly to get off the habit of smoking a cigarette. And you notice how I got rid of you by saying people, people, people. Or you can say the reader can quit smoking. The reader can chew nicotine gum. If you get rid of your you, and put in the reader, that makes your essay sound a lot more professional. Instead of if you say you, that's you. You're pointing right at the, it's you must do that. And so in academic research papers, it's rude to directly address the reader. If you're making an oral presentation, then you can use you. But if you're writing, you have to use third person case. And it sounds better if you get rid of you in writing. In speaking, it's okay. A prediction conclusion. So that's recommendation, when you tell the reader what to do in the future. A prediction is also very similar, okay? In other words, you predict once you make these recommendations and once the reader does what you say. So let's say I quit smoking. Well, what will happen after I quit smoking? Well, after you quit smoking, you will be able to live a long life, and then you'll be able to live long enough to attend your child's graduation or your child's marriage, okay, and so on, or you'll live long enough to see your grandchildren. And then instead of saying you, obviously, people can live long enough to see their grandchildren. People can live long enough. So that's a prediction into the future. After you make your recommendations, then you predict what will happen in the future after you make those recommendations. So a prediction conclusion can be a logical extension of the information in the body of the essay. Although it is oriented toward the future, it should not consist of unsubstantiated new claims. So smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer. Okay, that's the first sentence, is always the thesis statement. Once you quit, or once a person, or once people, you can say either people or a person or the reader. Those are three ways in which you get rid of you. Okay, so once the reader quits smoking, the reader will be able to lead a healthier life. The reader can live to see their children get married. The reader can get rid of their smoker's cough. The reader will be able to breathe easier and exercise more. The reader will not have to worry that their secondhand smoke will harm their children or their wife. People don't have to leave the building to go outside to smoke, so they can stay in their office to get more work done. In addition, if a person or if people quit smoking, they can climb the stairs without losing their breath. Do you notice that sounds a lot more professional written than if I say you? Now, if you're giving a PowerPoint oral presentation, then you can say you. And if you're writing a business letter, you can say you. But when you're writing an academic research paper, then you have to use third person case because of the audience. When you're writing for different audiences, so when you have to write a more formal tone. So for an academic research paper, your audience is going to be other researchers or your teacher. And therefore, you have to use the most formal tone of English, and that is third person case. So that is what you use for academic research papers. And then the last kind of conclusion is called a full circle conclusion. A full circle conclusion picks up an idea or image suggested in the introduction, echoes it in the conclusion. Such a conclusion might also refer back to an anecdote or example mentioned previously and show how it is still relevant. Full circle conclusions provide a satisfying solution to the problem you have raised. Here's an example of a full circle conclusion. So remember how we talked about Betty and the tube down her throat? So here we're going to talk more about Betty. So I'm going back to the Betty story. So that's known as full circle because I'm mentioning something that's already been referred to earlier in the paper. So first you have your thesis statement as your first sentence. So smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. So going back to Betty, shortly after she made her stop smoking commercial, she passed away of lung cancer. Betty was glad she was able to get the message out about the dangers of smoking to her children and grandchildren. At the time the commercial was being made, Betty was worried that her grandson was undergoing peer pressure and was trying to decide whether or not to smoke. She wanted that grandson to quit smoking so he would not die of lung cancer like she did. Betty hoped that by doing this commercial at the end of her life with a tube in her throat would convince her grandson to quit smoking earlier than she had to avoid the fate of having a tube down your throat at an early age. So that is an example of a full circle conclusion where you circle back. That's what full circle means. You circle back to whatever you mentioned in your paper to conclude and give a satisfying conclusion to your paper by concluding something you mentioned earlier. Okay, so that is a full circle. That's my favorite one actually. But anyway, and then the last one, a quotation conclusion. A quotation conclusion is a strategy for getting and keeping the reader's attention. Using this form of conclusion ends your essay uniquely and memorably. So you can use factual quotations, quirky facts, unusual or something funny quotations in order to finish your essay. And so this is very similar actually to the pie structure, if you ask me. So smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. So you have your first sentence as your thesis statement. Then you have 80% of smokers who start smoking in their teens die of lung cancer at an early age. Smith, 2020, page 22. It is a true fact that if you start smoking as a teen, if a person starts smoking as a teen, a person will die before they reach retirement. Why die so young? It is better to avoid becoming an early statistic by simply not smoking. When another teenager offers a cigarette, just say no. Don't become part of the 80% smokers who die young needlessly. Lead a long, healthy, non-smoking life by never starting to smoke in the first place. Just say no. And so actually, this quotation conclusion is very similar to a pie structure conclusion. And also, in all of these different kinds of essays, you can mix and match. You can have a couple of sentences that look like a summary, a couple of sentences that look like a recommendation, a couple of sentences that look like a prediction, and then you can stick in your story as well. So you can mix and match these conclusions in order to create your own style. That's what I mean by if you learn all these different styles, you can mix and match everything together to create your style of writing. So before you create your style of writing, you have to learn all the different rhetoric first so that you know what to mix and match. You see, just like recipes in a food, ingredients in a food recipe, you got to know what the ingredients are before you can mix them up to create the food. Same thing, painters have to learn all the different strokes previous painters have used, and then you create your own style. Look at Picasso. if you look at early Picasso, he drew realism because he had to learn how to draw first. Then by the end of his life, he created his own style of really weird drawings. If you go to the Picasso Museum, and it goes chronologically for Picasso from his early works to his later works. His early works, he was busy memorizing what other people had done. And as you look through chronologically his works, you notice that little by little, he started to develop his own flavor, style. This is the same thing with writing. And so when you're still at the very beginning where you've got to learn what everybody else has done so far. And then once you get that, how to do that, that's when writing becomes fun, is when you get to do your style and you get to contribute to the pile of, So what are the different kinds of introduction paragraphs, conclusion paragraphs, and body paragraphs, and which one is your favorite? Donald, of all the introduction paragraphs, which one was your favorite? You don't have a favorite? Chantel, which one of these paragraphs is your favorite?
I think the one that was like direct, meaning the turnaround one. Which one was that again?
Yeah, the turnabout one.
I think I like that one.
Okay, because that's so dramatic. Yeah, okay. So you like that one the best. That's actually, it makes your essay sound very rounded and fair because you're mentioning the other side. So it's similar to a counter-argument and rebuttal paragraph. So if you want to learn the difference between an argumentative, and I think I'm done. I'll go over this. The difference between an argumentative essay and a persuasive essay is that when you have an argumentative essay, you have the counter argument where you talk about the other side. Then you have the rebuttal in which you talk about your argument, in which you rebut the other side. So that makes, if you have a counter argument talking about the other side, then you talk about your side. That makes your argument stronger for the reader because you're able to rebut what the other side says. This is when you watch a presidential debate. And you said, and one candidate, I think Clinton, said that I will make sure that all of the immigrants have a legal access to a path to citizenship. And then Trump then said, I don't think that they should have a direct access to citizenship. I believe that there should be a longer way to do it, a legal way to do it, to have U.S. citizenship, and that they need to apply for citizenship from their own country. So that way, by the time they come to this country, they are already on the way, have filled out all the paperwork to becoming a citizen, and not just crossing the border illegally. That was, and then Clinton then said that yes, they can do it from their own country, but if they are already here, they should have access to citizens. In other words, they rebut each other. One says it one way, the other one says, no, the weakness in your argument is this. So when you watch the next presidential debate, that's how you have the counter-argument, rebuttal, and also you have the speech monitor would say, the host going, so candidate Clinton, how do you rebut what Trump just said? Or Trump, how do you rebut what Clinton just said? In other words, how do you respond back? What is your, response to that person's argument? So when you can have a counter argument and rebuttal, then it strengthens your argument. And when you vote for somebody, we don't vote based on people calling each other names. Instead, we vote on how that candidate feels about the issues. Okay, so who cares if it's low energy Jeb or what did Clinton say? Both of them insulted each other. That's irrelevant. When that's called the ad hominem fallacy. So we want to vote for whomever it is that matches our beliefs and what we think about the issues, not whatever names everybody calls each other. So that's also a fallacy. So when we write our essay, we want to make sure it's objective, neutral, and that it doesn't have fallacies and bias. And so that's I think that would be my last word. I think I'm done with did I finish? Yeah, I think I finished this essay. Oh, and how to go beyond the 5-paragraph essay structure. So what would happen if you have to write more than 5 paragraphs? So in your other classes, were you asked to write for more than 5 paragraphs?
We just had to write.
I'm not sure. I think mine was
longer than 5
paragraphs,
paragraphs,
but that was because
I needed
I needed
more
more
information
information
in
in
there
there
And
of
of
the
the
actual
actual
topic that
topic
we
that
had
we
to
had
write
to write
about.
about.
yes. And so how would you write an essay that's longer than 5 paragraphs, yet you still follow the 5-paragraph essay structure? How would you do that?
Do you
Do you
just
make sure that whatever the next paragraph is, you just
um
um
put in
put in, like,
how
you know
you
how
put
you
the
put the
three
three
like in your
like in your
thesis
thesis
statement?
statement?
Yeah.
Like, do you
Like, do you
start off
start
with
off with
that and
that
just
and
talk
just talk
about
about
that
that
topic in
topic
that
in that
one
one
particular
particular
paragraph?
paragraph?
Yes. So basically what you do is you just make everything longer. So let's say you can still use the same thesis statement, just make each thesis part of a section heading, and that's all there is to it. So basically you would say, so if you have your 5 paragraphs, then you could have, instead of paragraph 2 about lung cancer, you can have the first chapter. Chapter 1 is your introduction paragraph. Chapter 2 is lung cancer. Chapter 3 is about stomach cancer. And each chapter would have about, 20 paragraphs, roughly. Whatever it is, each chapter must have the same amount of paragraphs. And so when you write your touchstone paper, at least when I did, when I was teaching at my other school, so each section had 5 paragraphs. And so that 5 paragraphs for section 1, 5 paragraphs for section 2, 5 paragraphs for section 3. So instead of writing this 1 paragraph, this becomes 5 paragraphs about lung cancer, 5 paragraphs about stomach cancer, 5 paragraphs about throat cancer, and because it's 5 paragraphs, it's long enough to be a chapter. So it becomes chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. You just have to make sure that when you have the 5 paragraphs, that it's even. Okay, so you can't write 15 paragraphs here and then only write 2 paragraphs here. That's uneven. So 5, 5, 5. They all have to be balanced. And then your introduction paragraph would be the introduction chapter. That also can be 5 paragraphs, introducing your topic. And then your conclusion would be your last chapter in a book. So that's the last 5 chapters in the book would be whatever your conclusion is. So you could spend 5 paragraphs summarizing your book, doing the prediction conclusion, predicting the future to your reader in 5 paragraphs. So basically everything just gets morphed from 1 paragraph to 5 paragraphs, but you follow the same structure. And instead of and then you would put this under throat cancer and smoking. That would become a heading. Then you write your 5 paragraphs. Write another heading, and then another 5 paragraphs. Or it could be 10 paragraphs, 20 paragraphs. In other words, it can morph into 300 pages. That would be a PhD dissertation. That's equivalent to 8 years of college or something. That's how come people can write forever, okay? Whatever it is they're writing about. So the first chapter of any book is usually that's equivalent to your introduction paragraph. Then the last sentence of the first chapter of any book, at least not a non-fictional book, a scientific book, that should be your thesis statement. In other words, the main purpose of why this person is writing the book should be in the last paragraph of the first chapter of a book. Does that make sense to you? All I did was just expand on the 5-paragraph essay and make everything longer. That's all it is. In English, everything follows this linear structure because, well, just blame it on the Brits, that English is a linear language and follows this A to B to C kind of a structure, logical structure. Other languages don't do that. Other languages, think of the Bible. Do you guys read the Bible and you know that Jesus talked in parables, right? And when he said that, for example, the seed, if the seed falls on ground that's dry, that means that nobody listened to Jesus. It went in deaf ears out the other. Nothing grew, everything died. So that's seeds falling on dry ground. Then seeds growing. Then if you throw the seeds on ground and it grows big trees, that means you've got believers. People believed in God. So when you write in that kind of a way, that's the way Hebrew people write. That's Hebrew. Okay? So the way he talked, the way the whole Bible is structured is because the Bible is translated from Hebrew. Therefore, it makes sense that everything is written in a Hebrew kind of a story structure as well as writing structure. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. So Hebrew has a more circular kind of a structure. Japanese is more, sorry, Hebrew is more zigzag. Yeah, Chinese and Japanese is more circular. You only mention the subject once in the first sentence, and then the rest of it you go he, she, it. You can't do that in English, So different languages, different ways of writing, and the more languages, and Latin, like Spanish, you can have long sentences with lots and lots of which, who, which, and it makes perfect sense in Spanish. So that's why every language is different. The more languages you know, then the more you're aware of, and also it makes your writing and vocabulary much better, since a lot of English is Latin, and a lot of English is Germanic as well. So the more roots you know, the better your writing. So in the short term, the more you read, the better your writing, because then you can imitate the style, the writing style of other people. You can't imitate their exact sentences, but you can imitate their style. Style meaning like Ernest Hemingway, when he wrote his novels, almost no description, all dialogue to move his story along, whereas Charles Dickens, when he wrote his novels, there's 1,001 descriptions before he gets to the next action. And so that kind of writing style, creative writing anyway, that is something you can emulate for your writing. You can write when you write your creative stories, for instance. So that's something I emphasize in my creative writing classes. Basically, what you learn is academic writing. In other words, non-fictional writing. Creative writing includes both fictional and non-fictional writing, but academic writing it's only non-fiction only. So that's why my students, especially my little ones, they like the creative writing better, because then they can make it up off the top of their heads. But when you do academic writing, it's got to be based on a credible source. You see, that's the difference. Yeah. That's the main difference between academic and creative writing. But in my video, I showed you how you can put elements of creative writing into your academic writing to back up your thesis, like using the Betty story, for instance. I just went over, you can use be creative, or you could write a very short 3-sentence poem to back up your thesis, etc., etc. So you can put elements of creative writing into your academic writing, you see. It's not the same, because the purpose of the two kinds of writing is different. The purpose of creative writing is to feel the emotion, to move the reader, and to talk about yourself, you see. And then the purpose of academic writing is to inform and educate the reader, minus all the emotions. You want to cut out the emotions and be neutral and focus only on the facts. That's the difference. The purpose, the audience, you got to take all of that into consideration when you're writing. And then for scientific writing, for what you're majoring in, it's all academic. It's not about how you feel. Nobody cares about how you feel about a treatment if you and you can't just imagine yourself. I imagined this to do this, and this treatment. Can you say that to a patient? I can imagine a treatment for you to cure your...
No.
Yeah, see, it's funny. So that's why creative writing, you got to put that aside. Your imagination is how you're going to tell in a creative way the patient without crushing their spirit. That would be, or imagination, or creative way of saying hello, creating a good environment. So you have little ways in which you can be creative, but it's not creative in the sense of, I have a talking animal. Like my little kids, when I teach the little kids, that's why they like creative writing. I used to give time off for creative writing time and then academic writing time, because the school required both, and the little kids couldn't wait until it was creative writing time, because they want to write about their talking animals. So when you teach little kids, they're so cute. They equate creative writing with eating chocolate, and they equate academic writing with eating spinach. Isn't that so cute? That's what my little students would do. So you could tell I've been teaching every single grade. Grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, every single grade, all the way to 12. And then, of course, freshman English, which would be you guys, which is first year college English. So that's my range. I could give you books and books. I mean, I could talk on and on and on that you don't have time for. And that's what people said in their end of class surveys. Professor H talks too much in her lectures. Stop rambling is what somebody wrote. So I'm kind of rambling off my topic of, what was it? Different kinds of whatever it was. And so I'm going off on a tangent. So anyway, so I've got, that's one of my weaknesses. So this is creative. I created this. Yeah, these are actual paintings that I created. And
I was going to say that, like, you change your background.
Yes, I created this entire Zoom background, and that's how I bring creativity to this job, which is mainly to teach the thesis statement, because I love to do other kind of creative stuff that if you watch my writing channel, that's what I do, instead of just teaching the thesis statement. Every single semester, it's the 5-paragraph essay structure. How many different ways can you teach the same topic? So I change it up. So you could do the same. So you be creative. This is how I did it. And yeah, this is actually what I did paint. But my actual apartment does not look this nice. Okay, it's like you got your bed in the middle of the living room because you live in a one room, and then you've got your garbage can in the back of your computer, and so that just does not. Do students want to see your smelly garbage right there in the background or stuff like that? So this is really a nice fantasy. For my science fiction,
is that picture back there? Is that of you, or is that
that's my mother?
A fake photo?
That's my mother.
That's your mom?
And that is me, but I was 10.
Oh, okay.
And at the time, my mother had just passed. So I put. But now that my father's very sick, I'll put a photo of him in this background as well. So and those are my actual books. And so I know how to make a Zoom background based on the actual items in my apartment. The other green room, the whole thing was something Zoom that I took from the web. I thought, wow, I would love to have a place like that, but this one's a little more genuine because I did put in elements of like things that I created. So does this one look better? Because I think I might use this one for the next class over.
Yes, I like this one.
Okay, because this has actual stuff. So I figured for week 12 I should do something different.
Yeah, so I was like, she changed it up on the last day.
Yup, I wanted the last one because the last one everyone's so tired. I gotta do another lecture.
Finals.
Yeah, so I figured, okay, this will be, it's either this or I'm outside. So I figured, well, they could get to look at, I think the other class, I will change it to something else on their last day. They'll get sick of this. So everybody always gets sick of whatever it is they look at, For them, the next class over, they'll see the green room going, wow, look at the green room. So anyway, I just want to say goodbye to you, and I won't take up any more of your time. So it has been an honor and a privilege to have you both in my class, and all of my school
thank you so much.
And you are so welcome. And you can email me when you do graduate, and email me a picture of you in your graduation gown. How's that? For both of you.
Sure, yes.
Okay?
Thank you, yes.
All right.
That is the goal.
That is the goal. Well, I have a picture of myself because I live closer to my other school, so I actually attend their graduation. So then, your school is in Ohio, so I'm in
we're not in Ohio.
Centerville.
We're in Philadelphia.
Okay, you guys are scattered, but the headquarters of Fortis is in Centerville, Ohio. And a lot of
I'm not there.
Okay, so everyone is scattered, and so therefore I'm not able to go to your graduation because it's out of state for me. Whereas my other school is in Los Angeles, so I do. Anyway, so that's why I tell students.
Where are you from again?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, you're in Los Angeles. Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, so that's why I go to the graduation at my other school. Anyway, so I will have to cut out this whole last part because I think it's way too long. So that's one of the good things about videos. I could just cut it off from where the lecture ended. I could do that too.
Yes.
So that would make it much shorter. That way we could talk on and on, but that means I could just delete, not be recording. See, I forgot all about the fact that I'm recording. So I'm going to end this video.